Welcome back. Now let's take a look at how this market has performed. It certainly has been a bit of a blip in this market picture, but some green today, so certainly a much better prospect on that account. Pretty much a lot of green out in Asia as well, with a big gain for the Hang Seng, 1.7% to the good on that front. That filtering through to the European market, should I say, as well. Big gains there for the DAX out in Germany, nearly 2.5% better off at this point in time as well in this lunchtime trade. The CAC 40 in France, as well as the FTSE 100, almost 2% better off there as well. So all of that goodness means that we've also enjoyed some green as well. Back above 57,000 points is where the JSE has gone, 1.9% better off at this stage as well then. And a lot of that has been because of the gains out in the platinum miners, so the resources going up more than 2%, 2.5% higher as well for gold miners, with South Africa's listed property also enjoying some sort of gain on that front there. In terms of companies that were doing well as well, certainly have been those should I say, property companies, the likes of Attack as well, doing quite well. Sun, Aspen and Sun International right now also enjoying some positivity, more than 8% gained across all three of those. City Lodge, unfortunately, not enjoying the gain of Sun International and Sun as well there, so that one going down on that front. Over to the commodities board. Brent crude is slightly higher today, but we'll get to talk about it a little bit. There were a few hurricanes and a tropical storm out in the Gulf of Mexico as well as in the Caribbean, so that meant that more than half of the production of oil out in that region came to a halt. It did affect prices, but it seems that demand is still the issue at play here. So we've seen it go up ever so slightly today, just under 1% there. Platinum and gold also enjoying some good numbers. Gold still well below that $2,000 a fine ounce market, 1,950. Back below 17 Rand against the US dollar. The Rand a little bit stronger there, more than 1% to the good on that front. 20 Rand for a euro, and a British pound is 22 Rand 24 cents. With that then, let's chat about this market picture just a little bit more. Gary Boyson joins me here in the JSE studio as well. Gary, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. So all this green, where does that come from?
Yeah, so a little bit of optimism, I think, coming through from overseas as well. So, we saw Tencent up, it was over 5% this morning, and it was really on news that the WeChat ban, so the aggressive position that the US administration has taken against Chinese companies is being relaxed. And there's rumors of private discussions with companies like Apple saying that, they will be allowed to do business with Chinese companies. I think that optimism is just surging across the globe, helping to lift certainly our market. So, we've got a much stronger currency on the back of it, as people take on a little bit more risk.
But does it stay that positive, though? Is that just based on our own fundamentals, or is that just really international issues at play right now, and we could definitely see ourselves back above 17 very soon?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you can see the Rand strengthening. That's and you've still got Naspers up around 2.5%. So that's just showing you just how much these stocks are, especially the Rand hedge stocks, are up, and that's the global optimism. Absolutely, you know how quickly the news cycle can turn, and when we start getting a little bit more concerns coming through internationally, we're going to see it back on the back foot. But for now, if you're looking at the currency specifically, like technical levels are around 1640, so you could still see a significant appreciation in the local unit.
So this works counterclockwise, if you want to call it that. Brent crude price going up now nearly 1%, more than 0.75% in fact. But you had the Gulf of Mexico seeing that tropical storm, also hurricanes out in the Caribbean, so 50% of production, more than that in fact, goes out. But still, no real worry on that front, and the market just says, oh well, we'll go higher.
Yeah, so it's always difficult. So whenever you're looking at a market, you're always looking at what's already priced in. So, we've seen oil, jumping off those lows from earlier in the year. I think people are very uncertain in the oil market, because it's not just a matter of, the demand side of the equation. How fast are we going to come back from COVID? How soon will we see our roads, fill up and transport getting back to where it is? How soon will we have airlines flying, consuming, essentially oil? It's also obviously the supply side that's important. And now with these two hurricanes, as you mentioned at the top of the show, half of the production in the Gulf shut down. That is an enormous amount of oil being taken out of the market just as the supply comes back on stream. So I wouldn't be surprised to see oil prices moving slightly higher than they are now. But it all comes down to how much of this is already priced in. We already know that these production facilities are already shut. You're looking at Marco and Laura as the two at least the two large storms. And yet they they haven't yet made landfall. So we still have yet to see the total impact of the storms as well. So that will come. But again, you look at oil also on a more macro point of view. We are moving towards electric vehicles. I mean, and there's the longer term players in the oil market as well. The long term speculators certainly, I think, are starting to look elsewhere for their plays.
So interesting there. One must also make note of there that I suppose the oil price can't go too high, because once that production comes back from the Gulf of Mexico and the likes, and it's just going to go back down again, all right? So I suppose it would only be a very, very short-term play out in that.
Yeah, and as I said, markets are always trying to price in what's going to happen. Yeah. So, if you suddenly, you're trying to kind of balance the supply-demand dynamics before they actually happen, and that's how you're speculating. As you say, you expect these, this production to come back on stream, and I think no one wants a supply glut at this stage. Yeah. I mean, you've still got Saudi Arabia, really controlling the overall output on oil, but I would expect, just with the uncertainty, to see a little bit more volatility in the price.
First Standard Bank, then First Rand, and now ABSA. Things are still horrible in that banking sector. But I would have thought that because it's not a financial crisis, it's a health crisis that's impacted financials, I suppose, that the banks wouldn't be suffering too much. But I suppose things like credit impairments hurting the business quite a bit.
I think it's a health crisis that morphed into a financial crisis. And there certainly was stages, earlier this year when we had the Reserve Bank actively supporting the bond market. There was a financial crisis component to this. But I think markets, we've already gone through 2008 and we've seen the type of stimulus and the type of measures that the central banks can use to prop up markets. So we've largely escaped that, which is good. And looking at ABSA's numbers, I thought they were surprisingly good as well. A lot of the fall in the normalized diluted headline earnings per share, I mean, remember, you've got to kind of account for Barclays and all of that as well. So those numbers maybe not as useful as some of the other numbers that they're reporting. Yes, they came off aggressively, down 82%, but what you need to look at is the rise in provisions for impairments. So that's up almost 4 times. So these banks, taking a very conservative approach about what they believe loan growth is going to be. They're obviously also suffering as their net interest margins come under pressure, with lower interest rates. Yes. That's obviously affecting their ability to generate money as well. So it's a difficult environment for banks at the moment, but our banks are very, very well capitalized. We have, and I think they can be proud of what they're doing. I mean, ABSA is forecasting a drop in GDP of 8.3%. No bank wants to operate in an environment like that. Especially they're also predicting another 25 basis points at least being cut off the repo rate. So it's a difficult environment that they're operating in, but they're being conservative as the Reserve Bank guided. They've held back on their dividends to preserve cash, but their Tier 1 capital ratios are in a good place, and this is a very conservative approach from our banks. And while the headline numbers are poor, I think that the stability and strength of the bank underneath is still very, very important. And that, obviously, again, you look at the loan growth in certainly vehicles, in the extension of home loans, it's going to be down. Of course, we were in lockdown, but what really is going to be key now is how fast these banks can bounce back and how fast our economy can recover from the lockdowns.
Back on track, I suppose. All right. Very finally, though, another interesting story. Famous brands deciding to bow out of Tasha's and perhaps give back some of it back to Natasha.
Yeah, that's it. So Tasha's was started, I believe, in 2005. It's one of the many brands. I mean, you've got House of Coffees, you've got Steers, Wimpy's. Famous brands has a lot of very, very famous brands in South Africa. But just looking, I think, at the income segment and just trying to get its balance sheet right. It was an undisclosed amount that they sold it for, but essentially public capital now moving back into private hands, which has been a theme in our market for a long time. And I'm sure the family is quite happy. I mean, I think they originally sold their 51% stake for something like 10 million rand, and now when they only had 2 restaurants, now they're getting back 18 restaurants in South Africa. I think another 8 in the UAE as well.
Take it any day.
And they still control it. So there's something to be said for listing companies. I think if you're conservative and you just wait a little bit.
Gary and Arabiles. Let's see. We'll try something. Gary, appreciate the time, though. Really appreciate it. Gary Boyson there is from Rand Swiss joining us to help unpack this market movement. Hopefully then we'll get right through to that interview then with the CEO of ABSA, Daniel Minele, hopefully right after this. Stay tuned.